HR means to me adding genuine value to whatever organisation you're working in or for. It's only ever going to be people that make the difference. So any of the big theories around leadership or what makes a great business. So I've just been reading Good to Great by Jim Collins. And obviously it talks about a lot of things, but actually nearly all of it comes back to people. Everything else is going to flow from that.
Welcome to the HR L&D Podcast with your host, Nick Day. Tune in to discover what it takes to truly develop within human resources as we delve deep into growth, engagement, and leadership strategies that will help you unlock the hidden potential within your business. By listening to this podcast, we hope to empower you and your workforce towards achieving significant HR organizational success.
Today, I'm delighted to welcome Emma Wynne to the HR L&D podcast. Now, Emma is the founder of Gateway HR Services. They're an HR outsourced provider. Emma herself founded Gateway HR in 2007. She has an MA in Human Resources Management. She's lectured for the University of Northampton, and she possesses the CIPD at master's degree level. We sit down, have a fantastic chat about all aspects of HR. We find out a lot more about what personable HR means to Emma, as well as what the dark side of HR means as well. We also discover a lot more about the employee engagement process, why the employee experience is just so important, and we analyse as well the personalisation of HR, again looking at aspects that step away from things that are on trend at the moment, such as artificial intelligence. And it would be remiss of me as well not to discuss Emma's involvement with the Chartered Management Institute, or the CMI, because I know that something she's really passionate about is designing and delivering management qualifications to develop the leaders of tomorrow. So there's loads packed into this episode. I think you're going to really enjoy it. So if you're ready, grab yourself a cup of tea, grab yourself a coffee, make sure you're somewhere comfortable, because this is going to be a really interesting conversation about all aspects of HR. Emma is really engaging, and I'm really excited to have this opportunity. So I hope you're ready. And remember, at the end of this podcast, please do like it, subscribe to it, and share it with all of your friends. And if you are struggling to resource strong HR talent right now, then please do give me a call or drop me an email at nick@jgarecruitment.com. We are specialist HR recruiters, so we're here to help. Please do give us a shout. Right, let's begin. So Emma, how are you today? Welcome to the HR L&D podcast. How are you feeling?
Yeah, really good today. Thank you. Yeah, very good. It's actually our 12th birthday as a business today. So there's been some cake. So it's all good.
Congratulations. We've got cake here as well, actually. You've got two people's birthdays in the office. Not quite as glamorous as a 12-year anniversary. But hey, congratulations. Great news.
Thank you.
So for those that probably won't be familiar, I'm really excited to welcome Emma to the podcast today. I met Emma quite recently at a business conference, which was hosted by the RDLC, which is the Recruitment Directors Lunch Club, where loads and loads of recruitment owners get together, talk about recruitment, and Emma is kind of like our goddess of HR, where all the recruitment leaders like myself don't know where to go and need some support from an HR perspective. We kind of go to Emma and we outsource our services to her to say, Emma, we need some help. And it was a really great conference in Ibiza, really good chat about all aspects of HR and business and all sorts. And I thought, you know what? I would be absolutely remiss not to get you on this podcast today so we can have a little bit more of a chat about what you guys do at Gateway HR, about your background, because you've got a wealth of HR expertise that I know my listeners would love to hear about, to find out how you got your business going, kind of services you're offering at the moment, and how you're seeing the market. So really excited to have you on board.
5 quick questions. Understanding where we are to know where we are going.
What I would like to do, just to begin and just to sort of, I guess, set the scene, is I wonder if you could just tell our listeners a little bit about your background, your journey into HR, and kind of what led you to founding Gateway HR Services.
Yeah, well, my journey into HR started after university. So I did a business studies degree, and then you could specialise. And I went to the HR side, which, coming, as most people do, school to university, didn't have a lot of ideas to what that meant. But I just knew that I think people are absolutely fascinating, sometimes for the good and sometimes not so good. So I went down the HR route, which was definitely the right decision to do. I think part of that is also because before HR, I trained to be a primary school teacher, but then decided that's not what I wanted to do. But what I do really enjoy is the learning and development side. So whether that's with not anymore primary school children or adults, people to learn and put things into practice. So I did that. HR, as a lot of your listeners will probably know, is quite difficult to get into. So did a couple of kind of office manager roles to start with, and kind of shaped those to be more about HR than anything else. And then my first full-time HR role was in a manufacturing organisation. So a really interesting place to learn lots of different challenges and issues, ranging from obviously recruitment and finding the right people, keeping them, and building a culture where it's not about the people on the shop floor compared to the people in the offices, which was quite prevalent. And then from there, complete change, went into healthcare. So I was a HR manager for what was, and I think still is, the largest mental health hospital in the UK. As you can imagine, completely different environment, different challenges, but a really interesting place to be. And that's where a lot of my interest in mental health came about, because obviously I wasn't on the clinical side, but spending all my time with clinicians, I learned a lot in that time. And then in between all of that, initially I did my CIPD qualifications, and then quite soon after finishing was asked by the university to come back, start teaching them. So I worked at the University of Northampton for about 9.5 years, delivering on professional programs as well.
Fantastic. So how did you then go from that teaching process into, I guess, an HR, sort of launching an HR services business?
Yeah, so coming towards my end of my time at the hospital, as lots of people do, started a business after coming to the end of my second period of maternity leave, and that kind of point in your life where you decide, what do I want to do? Do I want to go back and carry on, or do I want to do something differently? At that point, before I'd gone on maternity leave, I had moved a lot more into the learning and development side, fascinated by what I sometimes call the dark side of HR, so all the things that you don't want to do, so disciplinaries, grievances, absence management, but also looking at it in a different way, thinking actually if we train our managers really, really well, these things don't happen that often. So I was working on projects in that area before maternity leave. And then when I came to make the decision, I thought actually that's what I would like to be able to do for businesses of all sorts of different sizes.
And it's really grown, hasn't it? I mean, if you go to your website, you can see all the different leaders that are part of your business. I know you're working as managing director of the business, and you've got 20 plus now sort of HR professionals, all with different areas of expertise, helping businesses across a range of services. So that growth is really quite impressive, because often there are a lot of HR consultants doing really good work as sort of one man bands, if you like, or one woman bands, whatever you want to look at it. But you've actually grown Gateway HR to something much bigger. So how's that growth occurred, and how have you led that direction?
Yeah, it's occurred. I'm a relatively humble person, so I'd say organically, but a lot of our work comes through word of mouth. So doing a really good job for one client, and that works particularly well within the RDLC that you mentioned. So working with one or two businesses, and then they talk to other people within their network. Quite a few of my students actually became clients. So as they progressed kind of in their HR careers, they've then got back in touch, either from a HR point of view, but more often from a management development point of view. So they then have teams, and based on what I covered when I was teaching them, so actually, can you come and teach our guys and girls how to do that? And in terms of growing the team, one of the like you said, a lot of HR consultancies, apart from the really big kind of national ones, a lot of them are one person by themselves, which is obviously how I started. But I identified relatively quickly that for lots of businesses, if they've got an HR issue and they want advice there and then, if you're one woman, in this case band, and you're with a client all day, your other clients are waiting. So you're potentially either not offering the service that you wanted to, or you're losing clients because they say, well, when we can get hold of you, you're great, but if we can't, we need somebody who's always there. So that's what we've always, the last 8 years, I think it is, I've always said that there will always be a fully qualified HR person in the office. So, during office hours, so whenever you ring, you're never going to have to wait.
Sure. And that's certainly how we came across you, word of mouth and great reputation. So, I hadn't heard of you guys before, but as someone as you say, within the RDLC network said, I had an HR issue that needed dealing with. And, you put us in touch with yourself, and we're now on the podcast, and we now work together as clients, which is great. And you mentioned earlier something about, which I know that you talk a lot about, the dark side of HR, the disciplinary redundancies, the documentation piece. But I know from chatting to you in Ibiza, you're equally passionate about and vocal about promoting the good side of HR too. So obviously, we're really keen to raise the profile of HR here on the HR L&D podcast. So I wonder if you could just sort of expand on what you mean by the good side of HR.
Yeah, the good side, I want to say, if you get that side right, you only have to cross over to the other side very occasionally. So a lot of it is looking at the culture of the workplace or the business that you have or that you're building. So are you building a culture where people, they want to come to work, they want to do a good job, they know what they're doing, they feel involved and part of that, and they have a good manager and a leadership team, or is it a culture where people don't really want to be there? If they've got the classic, if you've got a slight sniffle, if you don't really like work, you're much more likely to call in sick. And this is not, don't get me wrong, this is not about coming to work. If you're poorly, you should stay at home. But that kind of decision, or how hard am I going to work today?
Sure.
So we do a lot of work with businesses on looking at their culture and how, why do people want to come and work for you and do a good job when they're there?
And I know that, employee engagement seems to be the buzzword from 2019, 2020. It's on everyone's radar at the moment, and a lot of businesses assessing their culture at the moment and what that means, and looking at their values and those kind of things. What advice would you give businesses who perhaps have employee engagement issues, or perhaps want to improve their current levels of employee engagement?
Yeah, I would say the first thing is to get some kind of measure in place. So there's quite a lot of free, different resources and apps that you can use, or there's some that you can pay for. But basically, to get that measure, or depending on the size of the business, have one-to-ones with everybody to say how, what is it like to work here? What's good? It doesn't have to be overly scientific. Obviously, there's lots of research into engagement, but I always say you need to find your baseline. What do people think? What could be better? And then work on improving that. And again, there's lots of research into that, but quite often the answers are within the business. So what do people enjoy about working for you? What irritates them, for want of a better way of doing that? Kind of asking those questions. If you had a magic wand, or if you could have one thing that was different, what would that be?
So it's really getting to grips with, how people are actually feeling, perhaps not necessarily vocalizing. So really sort of trying to get underneath the underneath the hood, if you like, and what people are feeling about a business, and then trying to react to that.
Yeah, and I always say to businesses, don't ask if you don't want to know. So lots of businesses do engagement surveys or staff surveys or whatever they want to call it, and then it never ever gets mentioned again.
Oh, I see.
And that actually does more.
Yeah, I can imagine, because then people have raised something, and then it's almost like it's been forgotten, which I guess probably has a counter. They're trying to achieve one thing that ends up being counterproductive.
Yeah, because then people think, well, why did I take that time? Why did I tell you my honest opinion if you didn't want to know what it was? And quite often, it's not that people want to know. It's because maybe they're a little bit shocked. They don't get the results that they wanted, and then they think, oh, I don't know what to do with this. But equally, businesses are busy, and before you know it, you're 3 months down the line.
Sure. Now, I know that obviously you're head of training, obviously for Gateway HR. You clearly are passionate about training, because right from when you started to be a teacher, you've obviously gone back to university to teach. You're now head of training for your current business. And I saw a quote, I think, in one of your blogs on your site, where you talk about when people are managed and developed well, it's really the best thing that can possibly happen for both the individual and the organisations they work in. I wondered if you could expand on this in terms of where you've really seen this come to life. I don't know if there's, you don't have to necessarily mention company names or things, but where there's been an example where you've actually seen that transformation and the results of that kind of transformation.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this morning, actually, I was running a CMI group. So that's Chartered Management Institute at level 3. So that's mainly kind of team leaders and aspiring managers from lots of different companies completing a qualification with us. But the first thing that somebody said to me this morning when they came in, which, made my day, was that he'd recently been promoted where he works. And he said it's absolutely to do with the course. He said, because I've learned so much and done things differently, which gave him the confidence to go for that different role. But also part of his interview feedback was how he's changing as an individual in terms of how he's working. And we quite often get either within businesses, sometimes people then get back in contact and say, actually, I'm now working somewhere else because it gave me the confidence to go for a different role. And that's not necessarily about not liking where they were. Perhaps at that point in time, there's not a gap at the right level. It's really getting people to think through. That's what most of our training looks at. Obviously, there's lots of knowledge sharing as well, but it's always practical. So from what we've covered in a certain session, right, okay, what can you do with that back in the workplace? So it's not that you've had a nice day out.
Sure. I can totally appreciate how that would be a real motivator for you as well, because in recruitment, we're all about hopefully trying to get people to fulfill their potential at that point in their career by helping people with career moves. And when someone does get a move that they either thought was beyond them or that's really challenged them to secure, and they get it and they're in that role and they call you a year later by saying, how much it's changed their life. Okay, it's not a training piece, but it's amazing the feeling you get to watch someone, develop by pushing themselves. And if you've helped, even albeit on a small way on that journey, it's a really, really lovely part of being a recruiter. And I'm sure you get the same kind of endorphin rush from training.
Yeah, it is. It's lovely. I said, yes, like I said to him this morning, I said, you just made my day. And he actually works for a charity. And he's now a senior support worker. And he was, he was so pleased. But I thought that's great for the clients that they look after.
Yeah, of course, because not just for his personal development, I guess he adds more value and more return on investment, or whatever you want to put it, to the business he's representing as well, which is great for the charity in that example. Now, I know that you're also really passionate about seeing HR and people management as a truly valued function within businesses, and you're as passionate as we are here in the podcast about raising the profile of HR. I know that your personal strapline is for Gateway HR is kind of welcome to personable HR. So tell me a little bit more about that.
Yeah, I've always had a bit of an issue with HR being, whether that's in an internal function or external, as being known as kind of the police of the organisation, or the department that says no, or you only get to see HR if you've done something wrong or something is wrong, which is a real kind of bugbear of mine. But I also think that sometimes HR creates that for themselves by only behaving in that way, which might be a little bit controversial. So the personable HR is that actually it is all about people, getting the best from people, the benefit of the individuals, but also the teams and the organisation. So whether that's personable or line managers to give us a ring and say, "Oh, I'm not quite sure what to do in this situation. I want to get it right." But also when we're on site in organisations, that actually we're seen. So one of our team has spent the last 2 months in a manufacturing company in Northampton, looking at the culture, what's working, what's not working. And they have previously had internal HR. And the feedback being also almost like, we actually get to see you then. We actually get to talk to you, tell you what we think. You're not just, doing, filing and paperwork and compliance. You're actually interested in what we think about working here and what we would like, which for that organisation, the real revelation, but for us, that's the way it should be.
Sure, and it must feel for the people in that business that are working with your consultant, it must feel like it's a genuine extension of the business. So it's not just a end of the phone call. Actually, they can go into that office for that period of time, and they've got issues to deal with. There's actually a face rather than a robot or a telephone helpline that can really support them, which must be really nice.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so she's got a base within. Kind of within the shop floor, so people can just drop in and ask questions, but equally, complying with all the right health and safety side, being manufacturing, but actually, she can have a wander around, just talk to people, see how people are getting on. If she knows that somebody's been off sick, actually making the time to go and, find them and check that they're okay. And do they need any other support and things like that? So is that kind of personable side? Yes, sometimes there are things that HR gets involved with which are not so nice, but actually if we bring it back to the person, those things happen a lot less.
just slightly left field here, but I got an email yesterday. I think it's quite relevant. An email from a company that was trying to sell me a chatbot HR service. So if you're currently got an HR professional or you outsource HR services as we do to you guys, actually we could streamline our HR process by using this HR chatbot, which can handle 600 conversations at the same time and handle all of my HR problems, whatever they might be, whatever the size of your function, through the use of a robot. And I found that quite terrifying because personal issues with HR, whatever it might be, are so wide-ranging, even for a small business like mine, that the idea of a robot answering that, and maybe I'm a bit of a dinosaur, I don't know, and certainly I've had a podcast in the past talking about disruptive HR tech, and it is changing the industry for sure. But I thought that was quite alarming. Like, it's such a personal-to-person industry in my eyes that the idea of a chatbot handling all of my HR issues across my whole team, and I've only got a small team here in comparison to some bigger businesses, I'm quite flabbergasted, but
No, I mean, if you're a dinosaur, then so am I, because you just think, well, there's various things, isn't there? If it's a chatbot, then it's only got however many different combinations, and that's that's originally why I went into HR, because I thought everybody's different. I know some of the much larger organisations are, potentially, obviously, I'm careful what I say, staffed by people who are not qualified because they have flow charts and things like that. But I always say people don't fit into flow charts. What happens when somebody works in a way that you're not expecting? But also, how would that make the people in that business feel that the thing that you streamline is the bit about looking after them?
That totally agree. Now, obviously, I want to be really transparent to listeners here. I'm a small business. Everyone knows it. JGA HR Recruitment, we're a niche HR recruiter, and we do outsource our HR services to Gateway HR. And so I'm obviously a huge fan of what you guys do. It was, for me, a really obvious solution. I'm a managing director of this business, but I'm not an HR expert. I'm a recruiter. That's what I do. And I might work in the HR space, but that doesn't make me an HR pro. So I want the pros to look after the areas that I'm not a pro in, if you like, and that's why I also got you guys involved. So although I understand the solution and I understand why I work with you guys, there are obviously loads of small to medium enterprises and other companies out there across multiple sectors who maybe haven't considered outsourcing their HR services before. From your perspective, working in the industry, Emma, what do you think are the key advantages or considerations a business should think about if they were considering outsourcing their HR process?
Yeah. I would say the main consideration is make sure that whoever you go with, that they are, fully qualified. They know what they do. So who's going to be offering that advice? How well, not just well trained are they, but how experienced are they? Because there's so many different aspects of HR. So firstly, obviously, as you would kind of quality check who you're going to be working with, but also look at the sort of the levels of service. What's included, what's not included. You don't want to be stuck with a huge bill that you weren't expecting. But it's very much about getting an organisation that understands your business. So we have, well over 100 clients, but we can genuinely say we know all of them and what they do. And that ranges from, like I say, quite a lot of recruitment businesses, but we work with manufacturing, vets, schools. So we always say that HR in terms of legislation and processes is pretty much the same in any sector. But what you need to know to offer a good is how does that business operate? What's important, obviously within the law, but what are their priorities? What are their biggest challenges? And not offering things that don't fit.
Sorry to interject, but what do you think are the risks for those? Like, I was in this camp, to be fair, when we first started, because when you first launch a business, as I did on my own in 2008, and I didn't feel like I needed an HR service when it was just me. When I eventually got to a point where, okay, now I've got a team of people and it's getting bigger and bigger, and I can't handle this anymore. What are the risks do you think are out there for those business owners that perhaps are running similar sized companies to me, but have never even considered outsourcing their HR because they think they've got a handle on it, because, as you say, they've seen some flow charts or things like that? What are the risks out there for that kind of business from your mindset?
Yeah, I always think two types of risks. So you've got the legislation, the compliance side. So again, lots of people will say, oh, well, I can download, for example, an employment contract or a disciplinary policy. But it's the classic that if you don't know what you're looking for, you wouldn't know whether it fits. Does that make sense? So I would never venture into doing all my accountancy myself, because I'd be bust by now. That's not that's not my thing. But it's that compliance side, making sure that as a business you're protected. So looking at contracts, what are people to abide by? Obviously, the really important stuff, kind of pay, hours, notice periods. Certainly in the recruitment world, things around restricted covenants, what people can and can't do whilst working for you, and outside of that. But also having the key policies in place. So some of which are a requirement but even if they're not, we always say to people, if you don't have them in place, when you come across a challenge, if you haven't got a policy, it's quite difficult to manage. Whereas if you've got a policy, you've got a structure to follow. And obviously you can always put it in at the time, but an employee rightly is like to say, well, have you just created that? Because this is so you've got all of that, which is kind of, like I said, kind of the dark side, the compliance side, but is really, really important. And when you set up a business by yourself, unless you are in HR, it can be the thing that you never get around to, and then you come unstuck when you need something in place. And then the other side is the better side in terms of the culture. So what kind of culture are you building? What behaviours do you encourage within? What do you value? What do you not value, but what behaviours are acceptable and what's not.
It's one of those things, isn't it, where you probably realise you should have had it, but you realise it too late, because you realise it when you should have had it, and you go, oh no, I wish I'd done this a little bit earlier, because now I'm in the mud.
Yeah, absolutely. I would say probably one of the most common ones is around managing sickness absence. So still very often clients will think that there's nothing they can do about that. So if somebody's having a lot of time off sick, if we look at short term, which can sometimes be assumed that maybe the person's not genuine, and that's a whole other subject for another day. But if you don't have a policy, how do you know when to start managing that more formally, whether to give warnings, ultimately potentially whether to dismiss? But if you don't have a policy and a process, you're a little bit stuck. And that's why sometimes with clients, issues will have gone on for years.
Yeah, sure. And also, if they go on for years, eventually you can set a culture that encourages others to follow the same kind of behaviours, which is what you want to shut down. But we're going to pivot slightly and just find out a little bit more about you.
Time to find out more about you.
So the woman behind the business. So Emma, how do you relax in your downtime?
Well, I also have, one's nearly a teenager, two teenagers, one nearly. There's a lot of them around to different things. But when I get a chance to relax, I like spending time with friends and family. I like going to cinema and theatre if I get the chance to do that. And I'm not particularly good at it, but I also really like CrossFit. That's my attempt at being healthy, but I actually really enjoy it as well. Nice.
You're used to doing the old WODs at the end, which the beasting WODs. I used to do CrossFit years ago, and I just remember those WODs at the end. They were just hellish, absolutely hellish.
Yeah. And sometimes I'll walk into the office and they're like, oh, have you been to CrossFit? I'm like, yes.
Still red, still sweating, still recovering. So who are the two people who have been the most influential to you in your career?
Ooh, in my career, I think probably the person who was my boss at that time, the HR manager in the manufacturing company, because I learned so much from her because I was still relatively green at that point. But also I learned just as much from her about how to be a good manager, because she was very supportive. I mean, actually, she's still a friend now, that many years later, even though now she works in Dubai. But also, it was very clear where the line was, between being a manager. And I thought that was really important, because that's something that I get asked a lot. Can you be a friend and a manager? And I will always say yes, as long as both parties know where the line is.
Sure. Actually, I have to ask now. I'm going slightly offset here. Is she still an HR leader in Dubai now?
She is, yeah. She went out to work for a large chain of, they have enormous shopping malls out there, don't they?
Yes, yeah, I think it's the world's biggest, isn't it, in Dubai? Listen, I only mentioned this slightly off piece because one of my best friends is an HR director also in Dubai. And although Dubai is a big place, in terms of British sort of HRDs that have gone over, it's probably quite a small community. So you may well find they know each other. I'll have to find out off air if they're connected.
Yeah.
There you go.
I was going to say, yeah.
Unless your friend is Emma Seymour, which is my friend, then otherwise that would be really scary.
No, this is a Natalie, so that they might know each other.
Oh, we'll have to find out.
I think who would be the second one? Actually, the second one would probably be one of my lecturers when I did my CIPD all those years ago, who's sadly no longer with us, but he was just so enthusiastic about his topic. So he taught reward management, which is not payroll, because I'm not qualified in payroll, but how do you decide how to pay, reward, motivate people? And he just made it such a fascinating topic and really interesting. There's still things, again, that he taught me then. Obviously, things move on, but actually the basics are still there.
Yeah, passion's amazing. Are there any resources that have really helped you on your journey?
I do love a TED Talk, I say. So yeah, listening to different, either if it's just I want to look at a different perspective, or maybe I'll either search on definite speakers if somebody says, have you watched this? Or I find if you just put a topic in, there'll always be somebody who's got something really interesting to say. But I'm also very much, which is obviously when we met in Ibiza, I do like a conference, not for the obvious also reasons of it's good fun as well. Learning from speakers. So one of the speakers we saw, Ros even. So I'm into her audiobook at the moment.
For those who aren't familiar, Ros Savage was the first woman to row across the Atlantic, wasn't she? Or British woman to row across the Atlantic?
She was, yeah, and the Pacific,
yeah, and
the Indian as well, I think.
And she did it solo.
Yeah. Which I wouldn't be able to do that. I'd be awful if I didn't see people. I know it sounds cheesy as an HR person, but I'm very much a people person, so I would drive myself crazy if I was alone for that.
It was a really inspirational talk. We were obviously both present for it. It was a fantastic talk. So for those that haven't checked it out, I'll put a link in the episode notes. But Ros Savage is the lady that gave the talk, and it was a very inspirational lady. Slightly different. If you could be given any superpower, Emma, what would it be and why?
I think it would be to occasionally be able to stop time. So not time travel, because obviously Michael J. Fox proved that's a dangerous thing to do. But moments where you're just having such a lovely time. So whether that's, with family or friends, and you want that not literally that moment to last forever, almost just be able to put it on pause and look around and remember everything before it's gone. Nice. I like that. That's a new one as well. A new one for the podcast. I like that. First time. I like that. Last question, and we're going to jump back into some more of the HR related questioning. But if you could invite 3 people to a dinner party, who would they be and why? Wow, that's a great question. I would probably invite, I don't know if you've come across this man, somebody called Sir Ken Robinson, who's big in the education world, but about how the education system is all wrong. And he's just fascinating. And I've seen him talk, but I could listen to him for hours. So Robinson, John Cleese, just because he's my absolute favorite in terms of a comedy, and Gary Barlow, which purely because he could sing, or I could just look at him. Fantastic, excellent. Men, weren't they? I probably should have put a woman in there somewhere, but they were the 3 that came to mind. So that's cool. Let's see what comes naturally. First 3 in the door, not a problem.
Have you ever asked yourself, how can any recruiter understand my HR recruitment challenges? Please don't give up on your hiring challenges just yet. Here at JGA HR Recruitment, we appreciate the difficulties associated with attracting, recruiting and retaining top human resources talent. We also understand just how costly a poor hire can be. JGA HR Recruitment would like to partner with you to help you overcome your hiring challenges. Contact us today on 01727 800 377 or visit jgarecruitment.com to find out more.
Shaping the future of human resources together. Final questions.
So let's dive back in. And actually, you stole some thunder from me earlier because you mentioned your experience with the Chartered Management Institute, or the CMI. I know that you've got a good partnership with them. Actually, I'm part of the institute myself. I'm doing my own professional consulting qualification to the CMI, so I know the the industry quite well myself. But I know that you've been quite heavily involved in designing and delivering management qualifications. So I wonder if you could tell me a little bit more about what this work involves and how it's, I mean, you've touched upon it already, but how it's really been benefiting businesses.
Yeah. So we're authorised, or well, we're a registered CMI centre. So that means that we can deliver qualifications at levels 3 and 5 in management, leadership and coaching and mentoring. And what that means is based on, as I'm sure you'll appreciate, a very strenuous audit process, quite rightly, that they know they know what we're doing and we're capable of building a course to meet their requirements. So the management and leadership course, which is what I was doing one of the workshops for today, and a lot of it's around obviously what makes a great manager, a great leader. How do you combine the two? Obviously, the ongoing discussion of what is the difference between the two, and how they put that into practice. But what behaviours are expected of good leaders and managers, and a lot of it is about then people sitting back and thinking, oh yeah, actually sometimes I do or don't do that, and how that reflects on their reputation, but also the impact it has on the team. And then we also look at mission, vision, strategy. So it's, even though all still related to people, it's not all HR related, if that makes sense. So how as an organization do you establish what your vision and mission are? And we spend quite a lot of time looking at, are these documents kind of worth the paper they're written on? Does that make sense? So it's not just something that you put up in reception and it looks nice, but if you ask anybody in the business, they wouldn't know what it was. Or is it genuine? This is the vision. This is what we're all working towards, and we all know what we're doing. So that's kind of the first half of that course, which takes 3 months, and then the second half, which this group are about to go into, is all around teams and high performing teams. So what makes a great team? How do you put a good team together? And so they deliver the results that your organisation needs.
So if I was to bottle that up and put you on the spot, in your mind, A, what makes for a great leader, and B, what makes for a great team?
Yeah. A great leader is somebody who can inspire in their sphere of influence. So they might not be their direct line manager, but somebody that inspires you to work towards that common goal and that common vision. And a great team is a team that, again, works together and achieves the goal. So the big part of that is knowing what are we working towards, so we're not all going off in different directions.
Sure. I mean, the communication piece there is obviously really, really key. I mean, as you say, no point having it on a notice board pinned up if no one's reading it and no one understands what that goal is. So that communication piece comes back again. One thing I had to mention, because I know in HR, you get asked quite a lot as to, whether or not you get involved in recruitment. I thought it was quite an interesting question, and I saw this on your blog as well, because one of your biggest client bases you've mentioned are recruiters like me through your involvement with the RDLC. So when you get asked by clients whether or not you do recruitment, I know your answer is kind of yes and kind of no, because you support a lot of the areas that affects recruitment, but obviously you're not a recruitment agency. So how would you answer that question now? If I was to ask you, okay, Emma, do you get involved in recruitment? How would you answer that question?
Yeah. We will always say that we don't do the kind of the actual recruitment, if that makes sense. So we do the bit beforehand. So we'll sit with the client and say, establish what it is that they really want for the team and the business. So the classic is, somebody hands in their notice, you're in a bit of a panic. It's really easy just to go out for exactly the same thing. But getting them to think through, actually, before you do that, is that still the role that it was when that person joined? Is that still what the business and the team needs? And whether that then turns to whatever you want to call it, a job description or a role profile, making sure that it's the right thing. And then we'd also work with them in terms of, okay, so where is this person or people most likely to be found, and how to do that. But we don't do any of the recruitment. So we would then, obviously, we've got a big network. So we would say, actually, work with X agency or Y agency who specialise in what you're looking for. I mean, obviously, some clients will say, well, actually, we want to do it ourselves, or maybe due to budget, they need to do it themselves. I mean, whether that's cost efficient, we could come back to that. But if that look at, okay, if it's going on your website, what does it look like? How likely are you to attract the right people doing that way? So we say all the advisory things around it, but the actual recruitment, finding the right person, and again, will help then in the selection process. So if a recruitment agency puts forward 3 or 4 great candidates, will quite often get involved in the interview process.
Sure, that makes sense. I mean, because you're in quite a unique position, really, in terms of your exposure to the inner workings of recruitment businesses because of your relationship with the RDLC. So with that, Amanda, has that changed your perception of what recruitment agencies do, or has it changed, how you viewed the recruitment industry, having that unique position to view it from a slightly different angle?
Yeah, I think it has. I mean, one of my first roles after university, I mentioned that I did kind of office management roles, was actually in a headhunting company. Baptism of fire at the age of whatever that was, 22, 23. So again, that was nothing I'd come across before. So I did that kind of background knowledge, but yeah, certainly working with lots of recruiters and looking at the figures. And because sometimes, clients might say, oh, it's going to be whatever, X thousand or a percentage to find the right person. But then equally, I can then go back to them with figures from people like the CMI or the CIPD to say, actually, if you do it yourself, the chances are it will probably cost you almost as much in terms of management. And again, it comes back to, I wouldn't attempt to do my accounts because that's not my specialist area. So it's going out to a good agency that knows the market, has good candidates or access to good candidates. So as the client, you're spending your time selecting from the best rather than weeks trying to find where those people are.
Sure. That makes perfect sense. Well, it's nice to hear it from your point of view. It wasn't a question I'd planned for the podcast, but it kind of lended itself to ask because it's it's quite rare someone has that kind of that view of it, and it's obviously I would support all of those arguments, but I also equally understand that people sometimes have to go direct for budgetary reasons, but it's that time-saving element. Well, we're nearly into the L&D vault. It's a couple of last questions I'd like to ask quickly, and I want to go back to the employee experience piece briefly, because I know that's something that's really central to the core beliefs of what Gateway HR are offering. And I know the employee experience is obviously really important to you, and it isn't the same thing as employee engagement necessarily. So I just wondered if you could talk to us a little bit about why you put so much value on the employee experience and why you think it's so important.
Yeah, it's, again, probably 2 answers. So you've got the thing that I personally, which I know lots of people do as well, have a very strong, whatever you want to call it, moral compass or ethical stance. So we won't actually work with organisations that don't treat their employees properly. Obviously, we won't work with them if it's illegal, but there's a whole different level in terms of what's right and what's wrong. So you've got the human aspect, but also from a business point of view. So quite often people say a lot of the stuff that goes on around engagement and experience is all kind of soft and fun. And I will always argue that back and say, well, you can call it what you like, but that's what will make your business money. So if your employees have a great experience working for you, funnily enough, they're going to be the employees that, put in the extra effort, pull together with you, have the great ideas because they love working for you. So they're constantly looking for better ways of doing things. So actually by doing all the things to make your place a great place to work has huge benefits. And in my spare time, did my master's in employee engagement. So all the research actually shows the links between the businesses that do it really well are usually the businesses that outperform all the others.
Yeah, which wouldn't be a surprise to me for sure. I'm doing similar studies in my MA at the moment, but it makes sense, doesn't it? If someone's enjoying their job, then you believe in it more and you put that little bit of extra work in. Fantastic.
Yeah, and it's I always say the employee experience, even in not so nice situations. So we've had things with clients where they've had to make cutbacks, they've had to make redundancies, but we still say, well, you can still do that in a sensitive way, in an empathetic way. And we've had situations where clients have employees that are leaving the business, but they're actually saying, well, thank you, you treated me really well. I know you didn't have any other option. This had to happen, but thank you for how you've supported me through this process. And you think, well, if you can get it right in those kind of situations, then, you're doing it well.
Absolutely. It means they can remain advocates of your brand even after they've left your business as well, which is equally as important.
Absolutely.
Brand is key at the moment.
And the wonder that is social media, or you've got Glassdoor, which I always describe as the TripAdvisor of the employment world. And even if you're not doing it because it's the right thing to do, you should always treat people properly, because word soon spreads. An employer reputation can drop off really quickly.
Well, I mean, I could spend all day talking to you about a variety of issues and things within HR, because you cover such a remit, and it's been fantastic having to cover the questions that we have done today. If you could step into my shoes now, what would you have asked yourself that I didn't?
I would have asked the key topics that are going on in the HR world at the moment.
Perfect. So, Emma, what's the key topic affecting the HR world at the moment?
I would say one of the key ones, which has been rumbling along for a while, but it's really taken to a whole new level, but in a good way, is all the work around mental health. So, it's like I said, it's not new, obviously, but due to lots of kind of, in a good way, high profile work and cases, and lots of work with people looking at reducing the stigma of mental health, either in the workplace or outside of that. But organisations now really having to kind of step up and do something about that, because mental health, for quite a few years now, mental health and stress have been the highest cause of workplace absence in pretty much every sector. It should be about doing the right thing. But we put a case together for a business a couple of weeks ago for some training on mental health, and we looked at all the statistics for their sector, which was manufacturing. And presented that to the board to say, well, here are your potential savings if you take this seriously. And that did the trick.
Fantastic. Well, that's a great way as well of using, the other hot topic at the moment, certainly in the HR and the payroll space, is analytics, and how you can really utilize data to support efficiency savings. So that's a brilliant example of two hot topics, I guess, that are covering the market at the moment, how you can use them carefully together. Well, so we're going to open the L&D vault.
Opening the L&D vault.
In hindsight, what's one thing you know now that you wish you had known when you began your HR career?
I think it would have been, which, like I said, is kind of where I am now, is always look behind what you're seeing. So look for the cause rather than the symptoms. So if you've got a team where there's really high absence, I always say either you're really unlucky and you've got a really unhealthy bunch of people, which again is something that you solve, but the chances are it's going to be something else that people don't want to be working in that team. So deal with the operational side that you need to, but then delve a little bit deeper and work out what's causing it.
Fantastic. What's the one common myth you often hear in the workplace in relation to leadership or human resources, and can you debunk it?
Yeah, like I said, human resources is just the department that kind of nobody wants to spend any time with. You only see HR if there's something wrong. Like I said, sadly, in lots of organisations that is true, which is why it kind of perpetuates. But actually, human resources should just be what people are doing all the time. So making sure that managers are good managers, and then look at kind of building the culture that makes the organisation successful.
Sure, perfect. What is the one piece of advice you would give to someone embarking on a new career in HR?
I would say, just from my experience, but still speaking obviously to lots of students, is to just get into HR at whatever level you can. It seems to be, and Nick, you probably know this better than I would, it's very difficult to get in to HR, but once you're in, and obviously you do a good job, you can then progress and go into different areas. So even if you could operate at a higher level, if it's the organisation and the role you want to go for, to get in and then work your way up.
I totally agree. I think also there's more opportunities now than there's ever been. It's not doesn't have to be as as operational, transactional as HR admin officer through to HR manager, director. They've got opportunities now in HR lecturing, for example. And you've done some lecturing at the college. You've got HRIS and systems. You've got learning and development, analytics. I mean, even human resource and sales, software, project management, transformation, organizational development. Like if you get your foot in that door, the world is your oyster if you know where you want to go. And I don't think it's as linear as it potentially used to be. I think now there are huge opportunities, and if you can kind of follow whatever path that you really floats your boat, really, which is quite exciting. Last question before we finish: what does HR mean to you?
HR means to me adding genuine value to whatever organisation you're working in or for, because it's only ever going to be people that make the difference. So any of the big theories around leadership or what makes a great business. So I've just been reading Good to Great by Jim Collins. And obviously it talks about a lot of things, but actually nearly all of it comes back to people. So if you get the people of your business right, everything else is going to flow from that.
Fantastic. What a great way to finish. Well, listen, thank you ever so much, Emma, for joining me today. If people are listening to this and maybe they're a small business owner like myself who wants to outsource their HR service, wants to have a conversation about an issue that they're going through at the moment, or just wants to have an informal chat, where can listeners connect with you online?
Useful links, keeping the HR L&D community connected.
So I'm very active on LinkedIn. So just Emma Wynne on LinkedIn. I can send you through, well, we're connected, aren't we? So you can share that. But also you can go onto our website or just give us a call in the office. That would be great.
Fantastic. And I'll make sure that your LinkedIn profile, your website, which is gatewayhr.com, and any other links are available on the episode notes as well. So if you are interested, click on the episode notes right now. Click on subscribe to this podcast and then pick up the phone and give Emma a call. It'll all be available in the episode notes. So, of course, I would be remiss not to say that myself, as host of the HR L&D podcast, I'm also an HR recruitment specialist. So if you do have an HR-related vacancy and you do have the budget to work with an HR specialist, then please do get in touch with me. I'd love to have a conversation with you. You can reach me directly at nick@jgarecruitment.com, or you can give me a call on 01727 800 377. Again, those links will also be in the episode notes. So that's all. Thanks again for listening, folks. I look forward to bringing you the next episode of the HR L&D podcast real soon. And I just want to say another huge thanks, Emma, for joining me today. It's been a fantastic conversation. Thanks ever so much.
Lovely. Thank you very much. I've really enjoyed it.
Thank you so much for tuning into the HR L&D podcast with your host, Nick Day of JGA HR Recruitment. If you need help with a current HR or L&D vacancy, then please get in touch with Nick and his team. All contact details can be found in the episode notes. In the meantime, to make sure you never miss an episode, please subscribe to the show through any of your favourite podcast